The first thing Zylen Voss did when the alien transport shuttle jolted violently mid-orbit was reach across the narrow aisle and grab Tessa Ellory's hand. He didn't think, didn't calculate, didn't even ask if it was okay. He just did it. The alien students sitting behind them watched in silence, their large, translucent eyes blinking in unison. Antennae stiffened in confusion. The shuttle stabilizers kicked in a few seconds later, and the cabin lights flickered back to normal. An automated voice chimed overhead in a calm tone. Gravitational turbulence resolved. Please remain seated. Zylen kept holding Tessa's hand a few seconds longer, his knuckles white, then suddenly realized it. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to grab you like that, he said, releasing her hand quickly, rubbing the back of his neck. Tessa chuckled. Wasn't complaining. Honestly, I think you might have kept me from yelling something very unprofessional in front of our hosts. The two alien observers behind him continued staring. One of them, a tall, narrow being named Kelk, leaned forward slightly. Why did you initiate hand compression during a flight malfunction? Kelk asked, voice smooth but curious. Zylen turned, still a bit pale. It's called holding hands. It's comfort, I guess. Something humans do when we're scared or nervous. Helps us feel connected. Interesting, Kelk said. It appeared involuntary. Is it a biological reflex? No, Tessa said, unbuckling her harness as the shuttle docked with the orbital platform. But it might as well be. Humans do all kinds of weird things when we're stressed. Such as. Zylen stood, grabbing his bag. You'll see. They stepped out into the corridor of the Interspecies Cultural Exchange Station, a marvel of engineering orbiting Earth's upper thermosphere. For the next 6 months, Zylen and Tessa were assigned as liaisons to a team of alien students from the distant planet Alixis who were to study human behavior under high-stress conditions. It was part of a broader diplomatic initiative, something about cultural transparency and multi-species empathy. Zylen didn't care about the politics. He cared about not getting thrown into space. The group made its way to the station's living quarters. Zylen and Tessa had a shared unit on one side of the corridor, while the Alixians had a habitat module across from them calibrated to their atmospheric needs. Kelk and his companion, a shorter being named Vetra, followed closely behind, noting everything in their data tablets. Later that evening, while unpacking, Zylen sat on the edge of his cot, massaging his temples. The adrenaline from the shuttle incident hadn't fully worn off. Tessa entered, holding 2 metal cups. Tea. Mint. No caffeine. You looked like you needed something to keep your head on straight. He took the cup gratefully. Thanks. Still shaken? He nodded. I hate spaceflight. No control. Just blind trust. You've flown, what, 6 times this year? 7. Still hate it. Tessa sat beside him. You always hold someone's hand when you're scared? Zylen grinned faintly. Only when I'm lucky enough to have someone sitting next to me. Across the corridor, Kelk and Vetra were watching through the transparent barrier of their module. The image was muted, but their attention was sharp. Again, Vetra said, they initiate tactile contact. This is the 2nd time today. Kelk nodded. It appears to have a calming effect. I will add it to the list of observed stress responses. Do you propose we attempt the same behavior? Kelk paused. Unclear. Human skin is thermally inconsistent. It may not provide the same benefits. The real test came 3 days later. Zylen had taken Kelk and Vetra to the emergency response simulator ring, a zero-gravity environment designed to mimic catastrophic orbital failures. It was meant to demonstrate how humans trained for disaster. Everything was going fine until the fire suppression system tripped. A minor spark in one of the control panels ignited a faulty wire. The system overreacted. Foam burst from the ceiling, alarms blared, and the chamber shifted into red lockdown. Visibility dropped to 0. Stay calm, Zylen shouted, but the foam choked his voice. He felt something crash into his side. He couldn't see if it was Kelk or Vetra. Then something heavy slammed his leg as he tried to move. Pain screamed up his thigh. Zylen! Tessa's voice cut through the chaos. Where are you? Here. I think my leg, something hit it. A few moments later, the foam drains activated, sucking the mist away. Light returned slowly. Tessa was kneeling beside him, scanning his leg with a portable med reader. Don't move. It might be fractured. Zylen winced. Feels like a truck hit it. Kelk stood nearby, unharmed but visibly shaken. Why did you not retreat? I was trying to get you both to safety, Zylen said through gritted teeth. Tessa looked at the scan. Not broken. Just a deep contusion. You'll need a brace and crutches for a few days. As station medics arrived with a hover stretcher, Zylen reached for Tessa's arm. She took his hand without hesitation, squeezing it gently. Kelk watched again, noting the interaction. You are in pain, yet you initiate contact, Kelk said. Zylen exhaled slowly. It helps. Makes it feel like I'm not alone in it. Later, confined to the medical bay with his leg elevated, Zylen received a visit from Kelk. I have reviewed over 50 hours of human footage, Kelk said, standing beside his bed. In almost every instance of physical or emotional trauma, humans engage in tactile contact. Embraces. Hand-holding. Shoulder touching. Why? Zylen shifted slightly. Because it works. It lowers stress. There are studies, scientific ones. Hugging can release oxytocin. That kind of stuff. It's not magic, it's just chemistry. Kelk tilted his head. But why engage in such behavior during crisis when focus is required? Because humans are social creatures. We evolved to survive in groups. Connection isn't a distraction, it's part of how we stay focused. When everything's falling apart, knowing someone's there. It matters. Kelk left without responding. 2 weeks passed. Zylen recovered slowly. The contusion left him limping and he had to take frequent breaks during the day. Still, he resumed the training sessions, refusing to hand off his duties. One afternoon, during a scheduled decompression drill, an unexpected solar flare disrupted power across the station. Emergency protocols initiated and the entire habitat plunged into darkness. Tessa found Zylen by the corridor wall, leaning heavily on a brace. You okay? I'm fine, he said, though sweat covered his forehead. Just need to sit. She reached out, helping him lower to the floor. Across the corridor, the Elixian module was in quiet lockdown. Kelk and Vetra stood inside, observing once more. Zylen leaned his head back against the cool metal. I really hate space. You're doing great, Tessa said, sitting beside him. Even when things go sideways, you don't panic. He glanced at her. Want to know a secret? Sure. I'm always panicking. I just don't have time to show it. She laughed softly, then leaned over and hugged him. Not a quick pat, but a full, firm embrace. Kelk, watching from the module, finally turned to Vetra. I believe I understand now. Vetra looked up. Understand what? Hugging. It is not instinct. It is a choice. A deliberate one. In the face of uncontrollable factors, humans choose to connect, even if it does not fix the problem. Vetra blinked. But it seems inefficient. It is not about efficiency. It is about endurance. As systems returned to normal, Zylen and Tessa stood, brushing dust from their clothes. You smell like burnt wiring, she said. You smell like foam suppressant. They laughed, and Zylen winced as pain shot up his leg. Later that night, Kelk approached Zylen outside the medical bay. I wish to attempt your stress reduction behavior. Zylen blinked. You want a hug? I believe it may improve my processing efficiency. Zylen stood awkwardly. All right. Just arms go around the back. Gentle pressure. No squeezing. Kelk stepped forward, extending his arms in an exaggerated arc. Zylen wrapped his own around the alien's narrow frame, holding briefly. Kelk stepped back. I feel slightly less agitated. Told you. I will log this as a verified technique. As Kelk walked away, Tessa appeared with 2 cups of tea again. You hugging aliens now? Apparently, I'm a cross-species therapy animal. Well, she said, sipping. You're doing a hell of a job. Zylen looked out the viewport, Earth spinning slowly below them. The stars beyond shimmered like distant lighthouses. For the first time in days, he felt the tension in his shoulders ease. Maybe it wasn't just about surviving space. Maybe it was about surviving it together. By the second week of Zylen's mobility recovery, the station's artificial gravity was temporarily disabled for scheduled maintenance. It was supposed to last 3 hours. It lasted 9. The thing about zero gravity, Zylen had come to realize, was that it forced you to confront the absurdity of everything. Take walking, for instance. When you couldn't walk, you had to bounce, pull, and sometimes flail with what dignity you could salvage. He drifted across the corridor, one arm around a guide rail, a stiff neoprene brace strapped from upper thigh to ankle. Every so often, he'd gently rotate himself to avoid colliding with a wall panel or a gliding Elixion. Vetra, hovering nearby with limbs tucked close to her narrow body, watched him struggle without speaking. Her pupil-less eyes tracked his every motion. "You're not gonna offer assistance, are you?" he asked, pausing to catch his breath mid-float. "I have not determined if that would constitute interference or a learning opportunity," she replied. He squinted. "Learning for whom?" "For me." "Possibly for you, though that seems unlikely." He kicked gently off the wall, overshot his target handhold, and spun slowly, one foot grazing a ceiling vent. The brace threw off his balance. Tessa's voice came from behind. That was graceful, like a wounded otter in a wind tunnel. "I'd like to see you do better with a 10-pound anchor strapped to your leg." "Don't tempt me." She floated beside him, offered an elbow. He took it without comment, and they drifted together toward the hydroponics lab. The Elixions had requested to observe the human food ecosystem in microgravity, and for some reason the station's command approved it during a gravity outage. Inside the lab, the air was humid and smelled faintly of basil. Rows of floating plant racks rotated slowly, each tethered to a central spine. Elixion students clustered near the tomato section, murmuring in their rhythmic language. Kelk approached, stylus in hand. "These red spheres. They are nourishment." "They're tomatoes," Tessa said. "Technically a fruit. They grow suspended in fluid and light. No soil? Hydroponics. Roots in nutrient water. Controlled light spectrum. Efficient and less waste." Kelk turned to Zylen. "Do you rely on this method for survival?" "Not entirely," Zylen said. "But it's a backup, in case supply chains fail." "Which they do." "Often." Vetra floated beside a spinach cluster, observing its leaf curl. "You consume these raw?" "Sometimes. Sometimes we cook them." She tilted her head. "Why subject them to thermal alteration if they are already ingestible?" "Because they taste better that way. And some nutrients are easier to absorb after cooking." Kelk scribbled rapidly. "So the act of cooking is both survival and preference-based?" "Exactly," Tessa said. "It's a balance. Like seasoning. You don't need it to survive, but it makes surviving more pleasant." This seemed to puzzle them. Vetra hovered quietly for a moment, then asked, "Is preference worth the additional energy cost?" "We think so." Zylen gestured at the nearest plant rack. "There's a reason we built a whole orbiting greenhouse instead of just eating nutrient paste." Vetra blinked slowly. "Curious." Zylen's leg throbbed. The brace compressed slightly every time he twisted, and the lack of gravity made his blood pool oddly. He reached for the medical pack strap to his waist, pulled out a cold patch, and slapped it onto the side of his knee. Kelk watched. "You self-administer treatment without diagnostic confirmation? I already know what it is. It's not guesswork. But your biology is complex. You said earlier that stress can mask warning signals." "I'm not masking anything," Zylen muttered. "I'm just managing it." Tessa's voice lowered. "We've got a full med team on station." "You want me to call one?" He waved her off. "Only if I start talking about my childhood unprompted. You did mention an otter earlier." "Unrelated." Kelk floated closer. "I would like to observe your next treatment cycle. From beginning to end." Zylen stared at him. "You want to watch me ice my leg? I want to understand how you choose to endure discomfort rather than seek external solutions." "It's not a choice. It's a calculation. I can still move. I've got things to do." "That's enough." "Enough for what?" "To keep going." Kelk said nothing for a long time. A few hours later, artificial gravity returned with a sudden lurch. The hydroponics lab groaned as racks settled into place, and several Elixions stumbled, unused to the abrupt shift back to weight. Zylen landed awkwardly, brace jarring his leg. He hissed and leaned against the wall. Kelk steadied himself and turned. You did not fall. I've had practice. You anticipated the return of gravity without precise timing? I figured it'd kick in eventually. Might as well be prepared. Kelk seemed to digest that. Preparedness without certainty. This seems to be a common thread. Tessa re-entered with a tray of sealed ration packs. Lunch break. Unless you want to keep interrogating the wounded. Kelk stepped back. I am done for now. They sat at the edge of the lab, ration packs open. Zylen bit into a protein square that tasted faintly of cardboard and cinnamon. Tessa offered a piece to Vetra, who accepted it with the caution of someone examining a fossil. This is textured, Vetra said. Textured is generous, Tessa replied. Zylen chewed carefully. You know, humans once ate fermented fish buried underground for weeks. Kelk's stylus dropped. Why? Because someone was hungry enough to try it. And they survived. So others tried. That is not a logical origin for culinary tradition. No, Tessa said, but it's a very human one. Later that evening, Zylen returned to the rehab chamber. It was a compact room with resistance bands, balance trainers, and a med scanner mounted to the wall. He strapped in, set the scanner to low-impact therapy mode, and began a slow flexion cycle. Kelk and Vetra entered silently. Zylen glanced at them. You're really interested in this leg, huh? You continue to engage in physical recovery despite visible discomfort. It's called rehab. If I don't push the joint, it'll stiffen. Then I'll need surgical correction. That's worse. Vetra examined the scanner readout. You are choosing short-term distress to avoid long-term damage. Exactly. That is counterintuitive. Welcome to being human. Kelk watched the slow motion of the brace actuating. Would you not prefer sedation during these sessions? Sure, but then I'd be out for hours. Can't do my job that way. You prioritize function over comfort. Function is comfort, Zylen said. Eventually. Kelk turned to Vetra. He does not view pain as an enemy. No, she replied. He views it as a signal, not a command. The next morning, Zylen awoke to find a small object outside his door. It looked like a soft polymer ring, iridescent with a notched interior. Tessa found him examining it. What is that? Not sure. Looks like Elixian design. He tapped his comm. Kelk, did you leave something outside my quarters? Yes. It is a compression coil. Used in our species during joint trauma recovery. It distributes pressure evenly and stimulates tissue reformation. Zylen raised an eyebrow. You're giving me alien medical tech? I believe it will ease your discomfort. You may decline if you distrust its efficacy. Zylen turned the coil in his hand. Thanks. I'll give it a shot. He fitted the coil above the brace, adjusted the tension, and felt a subtle warmth radiate through the tissue. The ache faded slightly. Not gone, but quieter. Tessa watched him test it. How's it feel? Like someone finally turned down the volume. Vetra passed by in the corridor. We adapt when necessary. You taught us that. Zylen leaned against the hatch frame. You realize this means I owe you now. Kelk stopped. That is not our custom. But if you wish to reciprocate, I am open to further observation of your recovery rituals. Tessa laughed. Congratulations. You're now a full-time medical exhibit. Zylen exhaled, looking down at the alien coil. Could be worse. Vetra turned back. There is one more thing. What's that? She stepped closer, hesitating. Then, very carefully, she extended both arms outward, mimicking the awkward arch Zylen had shown weeks earlier. Zylen blinked. You want a hug? It is. The correct gesture, yes. He stood, adjusted his stance, and gently wrapped his arms around her. Vetra was cooler than expected, her skin smooth and slightly elastic. She held the position for exactly 4 seconds, then stepped back, nodding. I believe I understand the appeal. Zylen smiled. It grows on you. Kelk looked between them, then turned and walked away, muttering something about updating protocol files. Tessa leaned against the wall. You're starting a galactic hugging trend. He winced as he shifted weight off his leg. I'll settle for not needing crutches by next week. She handed him a data slate. Rehab schedule's updated. You're on light duty until the coil's effectiveness is confirmed. He scanned it. Fine. But I'm not missing the next simulation. Only if you can walk without looking like a drunk flamingo. Zylen tapped the coil gently. With this thing? I'll be sprinting. Tessa arched an eyebrow. Sprint and I'm reporting you. He grinned. Fair. Walking enthusiastically then. As the corridor lights dimmed for artificial night, the station settled into a gentle hush. Zylen rotated his knee once, felt the warmth from the coil stabilize. Pain didn't vanish, but it no longer dictated the terms. The room was too quiet for Zylen's taste. The rehab chamber, normally humming with low-level diagnostics and faint mechanical whirs, was empty except for him and Kelk. The lights had been dimmed to simulate late evening, casting a soft gold across the floor. A timer on the wall ticked down the final minutes of his therapy cycle. Zylen exhaled slowly through his nose, keeping his knee aligned with the motion arc of the resistance unit. The Elixian compression coil was fitted just below the brace now, and the difference it made was noticeable. The inflammation had receded and he could bend the joint a few degrees further than last week. Still stiff. Still sore. But improving. Kelk stood a meter away, not scribbling for once, just watching. Zylen didn't look up. You've been quiet for 20 minutes. Either you're planning to dissect me or you're reconsidering your career. I was considering your recovery pattern, Kelk said, voice lower than usual. It is slower than I expected. That's because I'm not a machine. Joints take time. Swelling has to go down. Muscle strength has to rebuild. You can't rush it without risking re-injury. Kelk folded his arms, which for an Elixian meant angling two sets of limbs behind his back and slightly overlapping his torso plates. Your medical technology is advanced. Yet you rely heavily on time and patience. Yeah, because even the best tech can't rewrite biology. Zylen paused mid-motion. You can support healing, but you can't force it. Cells don't care how impatient you are. Kelk shifted his weight. That seems inefficient. Inefficiency is sometimes the safest route. The timer chimed. Zylen carefully disengaged from the unit and stood, testing weight on his leg. Still favoring it, but he didn't wobble this time. He reached for the bench to grab his water bottle. You know, he said, wiping sweat from his forehead, I didn't expect to be lecturing aliens about inflammation cycles and soft tissue repair. I thought this job would involve more diplomacy. Ceremonies. Flags. Kelk's eyes blinked in sequence. We were informed that observing humans under stress would yield the most authentic insights. Ceremonial acts are rehearsed. Pain is not. Zylen took a long drink. You're not wrong. There was a pause. Then Kelk said, do you experience emotional distress when physical progress is slow? Sometimes. Especially when I can't do simple things. Like stairs. Or running drills. Makes you feel fragile. Yet you do not conceal it. No point. The limp's obvious. May as well be honest about it. Kelk nodded gently. Among my kind, weakness is rarely displayed. It is considered hazardous. Zylen glanced at him. You should try it sometime. Vulnerability. Might surprise you. Kelk stood still for several seconds, antennae slowly rotating. Then he said, I attempted a hug yesterday. Zylen raised an eyebrow. Voluntarily? It was. Initiated by Vetra. I did not resist. And? It was. Less unpleasant than I anticipated. Zylen chuckled, limping toward the door. High praise. They walked back through the corridor in relative silence. The station's night cycle lighting made the walls look warmer than usual, and a few human techs were winding down their shifts, exchanging quiet nods as they passed. Tessa was waiting near the crew lounge, arms crossed, not impatient but alert. You're late, she said. Did Kelk talk you into a second round of diagnostics? Just lost track of time. She glanced at his posture. Still favoring the left. Zylen nodded. Better than yesterday, though. Kelk interjected. His gait has improved by roughly 12%. Tessa raised an eyebrow. You're tracking his gait now? Kelk answered plainly. I am tracking everything. They entered the lounge. It was modest 4 chairs, a small table, and a wall screen that occasionally played Earth news on mute. The viewports were the main feature, offering a sweeping look at the dark side of the planet, dotted with city lights. Zylen sat slowly, adjusting his leg. Tessa handed him a steaming mug. Chamomile. You're out of excuses for not sleeping later. He took it without protest. Thanks. Kelk remained standing, eyes fixed on the viewport. I would like to propose a final review session tomorrow, to summarize our findings. Tessa looked over. Already? I thought you were staying another month. We have observed sufficient data. The core patterns are consistent. Zylen sipped his tea. And what patterns are those? Kelk turned to face them. Humans experience stress in unpredictable intervals, often unrelated to external danger. You construct rituals to cope: physical contact, shared meals, verbal reassurance. You do not suppress vulnerability, but instead reframe it as connection. These behaviors increase group cohesion and individual resilience even when physical conditions do not improve. Tessa blinked. So, you figured out that hugs and tea make people feel better. Kelk didn't flinch. Yes. Zylen leaned back in his chair. If you'd told me at the start that this whole mission was just so you could write a thesis called The Psychological Utility of Human Coddling, I'd have saved you a lot of time. Kelk unfolded a small data slate. I have titled it Adaptive Empathy and Biochemical Distress Mitigation in Homo sapiens. Way catchier, Tessa said. Vetra entered just then, carrying a bundle of cables. She set them on the table and spoke without preamble. We have completed the interface translation module. You may now integrate your coil into your existing med sensors. Zylen blinked. You upgraded my brace? Correct. It will now monitor temperature shifts and pressure variation. You will receive alerts if inflammation returns. Tessa looked impressed. That's actually useful. Vetra added, it also glows green when healing is optimal. A visual cue. We noticed humans respond well to color-coded reassurance. Zylen laughed into his mug. That's disturbingly accurate. Kelk added, we have also replicated the compression coil design using your station's materials. Your medical team can now produce them independently. Zylen stared at him. You're leaving us with alien tech? You improved our understanding of pain management. This is our contribution in return. Tessa sat beside him. That's surprisingly generous. Vetra looked at her. You gave us the concept of comfort as an active choice. That was not something we possessed. Kelk folded his slate. We came to study stress. We are leaving with a model for enduring it. Zylen nodded slowly. You know, for a group of emotionless observers, you're starting to sound almost sentimental. We analyzed over 300 hours of human footage, Kelk said. It was inevitable. They sat in silence for a while after that. The station's systems hummed quietly around them, and the planet below turned steadily, indifferent to the conversations in orbit. Zylen finally stood, testing his leg. It held. Tessa rose too. You want to try stairs tomorrow? Let's not get crazy. Kelk stepped forward. Before departure, we would like to perform one more replication of the hug ritual. For documentation. Zylen looked at Tessa. You or me? She gestured toward him. You're the injured party. Tradition says it's your turn. He opened his arms. Kelk moved forward, carefully aligning himself before closing the gap. The contact was firm but not stiff. A four-limbed embrace that felt oddly sincere. Vetra joined a moment later, forming a loosely coordinated group hug. Tessa leaned against the wall, arms folded. This is either heartwarming or the strangest diplomatic gesture in orbit. Zylen shrugged. Why not both? After the Elixians returned to their module, Tessa turned to him. Legs healing. Aliens are hugging. You're drinking tea voluntarily. What's next? He considered that. Maybe. Sleep. Without alarms. You've earned it. He limped toward the crew quarters, slower but steadier than before. And for the first time in weeks, he didn't feel like he was catching up to himself. He was exactly where he needed to be.